Many of you who are following my channel are aware of the Columbia Booga sphere video that I posted last week. The sphere is still being tested, and for those of you that still may think it's a hoax, then I ask you to think about the cost of the equipment you'll see the research team using in the next clip. Filming a hoax equivalent to a Hollywood set is certainly not impossible, but conversely would cost a substantial investment for virtually no return.
Lo que te puedo mencionar es que en el análisis químico, que es el punto de partida de esto, es decir, es un análisis que hacemos con un espectrómetro XRF, nos da la composición de metales que tiene esta esfera. Nos dio el 95.5% de aluminio, y lo que yo me esperaba en mediciones de temperatura, mediciones de dureza de ese aluminio, pues era encontrar las características que tienen esos materiales. Sin embargo, me llevo una gran sorpresa, porque al estar monitoreando la temperatura de la esfera, cuando tenemos la temperatura ambiente aquí de 24 grados, 24 y fracción, 24.5, 24.8, la esfera en ciertos momentos nos arroja temperaturas de hasta 33 grados centígrados. Esto es algo que, si yo me pongo a tratar de encontrar por qué pasa eso, obviamente la transferencia de calor que hay de un cuerpo hacia otro siempre va del de mayor temperatura al del menor, a la de menor, ¿verdad? Entonces, aquí nos estamos encontrando que sin haber un factor externo hacia la esfera, esta incrementa su temperatura. Tratamos de tomar mediciones inclusive en el mismo sitio, y también varió. Estamos hablando en el mismo sitio a milímetros, después a centímetros, pero también en las demás zonas, como que llega un momento en el que la esfera se desestabiliza de temperatura y empieza a subir. Y esto es algo que esta esfera no se apega a esas leyes. Sí, tuvimos alteraciones importantes.
la composición y la temperatura de la esfera.
Que no es externo,
Es interno.
es interno.
Adentro.
Algo hay ahí que da como resultado este comportamiento. Este comportamiento es inusual en materiales. Jaime, tengo más de 50 años trabajando en la industria metalmecánica. He tenido conocimientos de metalografía. He estado trabajando hace muchos años atrás en compañías que se dedican a fabricar aceros.
¿Pudiste observar de esta esfera después de estarla analizando durante varias horas?
Mire, lo que analizamos de que llegamos fue la cuestión, la duda, porque le teníamos la curiosidad. Y nosotros básicamente en el equipo que traemos fue la aleación. Eso es el componente de qué es la esfera, qué tipo de metal era. Cuando empezamos a leer la aleación nos dimos cuenta que en su mayoría era aluminio, con un poco de fierro y algo de níquel.
95% aluminio.
But that's the best I can do for you.
Okay. Thank you.
Next question.
My question sort of piggybacks your last statement. We've been working with human health using water and platinum palladium, and I'm quite interested in your comment about the use of water with a perpetual engine for cars. So I think there's a connection there. We've been using the electrolysis using platinum palladium. Has any mention been made in what you know about that and keeping the brain going, which would be very equal to keeping that car engine going?
Yeah. Is this the car? Oh,
Yeah, the car that runs on water.
Yeah.
She wants to know how to do it perpetually.
I'll tell you what we did. Harry Diamond Lab in Adelphia, north of Washington, D.C. made that. I had a photograph of it over in my bag today. I wish I'd have brought it over so I could show it to you. I showed it to Senator Glenn. He had to have that photo. That was what we called fluid hydrodynamics. What we did at Adelphia, we took an integrated circuit, and it was carved out, and in it, in the circuit, we inserted fluid, water, and it ran. It was a pattern was the electrical integrated circuit. And they made it at Adelphia, and it actually ran. And as I say, I have a picture of it right over in the house here. I had to give Senator Glenn that. So it was a reality, and I told Senator Glenn when he took the picture, Senator, why don't you go up to Adelphia? They might still have it up there. That's north of Washington. It was just a little cart, but it ran on water.
I just want to say it's very nice to meet somebody who's actually had experience in the past by witnessing aliens that have either been deceased or have been still alive, kept in like certain tanks. My question is, before you retired out of the military, have you ever experienced anything like the place is called Area 51 and a special alien underground base called, the place was probably called Groom Lake, Nevada. Also in relation to, as most of the time the earthquakes in California have been in relation to the hovercraft that's been mostly traveling over states that's been causing the tremors for the earthquakes.
He asked you about Area 51 again. He doesn't realize you already covered it. And he then asked about hovercrafts over California. Do they have an effect on causing earthquakes?
No, I don't believe that they have any effect on earthquakes. Now, I've been asked about Area 51 a few times tonight. The reports on Area 51 are out of proportion to what really goes on there. In fact, tonight when we were in supper, I was asked a question which you should know. The installation that you should ask me about is the one at Alice Springs in Australia. We have an installation there. And it's there because that is one of the lowest gravity areas in the world. What are we doing there? Missiles and aircraft. What are we doing at Area 51? The stealth, the B-2. Yes, there's some secrets on the B-2. A friend of mine, editor of Aerospace Magazine, wrote a book on it, is a pilot on the B-2. And I asked him one day, what's up in the front of that? The way the B-2 is at low speeds, it couldn't possibly stay in the air. There's something up in the leading edge that holds it up. And that's why it cost $1 billion to build one of them. The stealth, yes, it's almost radar proof. That is not unusual in this age. Composites do exactly the same thing. My son builds aircrafts which are composite. And he was approached not too long ago by the government people because 2 of these aircraft made a composite, ended up in Mexico. And you know what they're doing? They're flying dope around and the radars can't pick them up. 5,000 feet in the air, you can't even see them anymore. And they came to him with an extra gas tank in the back. And of course he told them that's not unusual. If they fly across the ocean, they put extra gas tanks in. So the stealth technology is not unusual. You see the movies, they make it appear unusual, but it isn't. The only craft that's really unusual is the B-2. The configuration of the B-2, it shouldn't fly, but it does. Because there's something in it that keeps it up. And it has to be an anti-gravity device.
All I've known is that they've been creating a lot of black hovercraft, like that's related to the government. Pretty much like the bomb.
No, hovercraft cannot create an earthquake. Now, when I came back from Italy, there were some scientists over there, and the UFO came over and they let some rays down, and they analyzed the ground where this ray hit. And I sent it to my scientist friend down in Austin, Texas. I told him he should read that. It had effects on the ground where the rays came out. It hovered in the air, but it didn't cause any damage or earthquakes. Those rays coming out, if you notice a lot of these UFOs, the colors change. That's because the finger control of the aircraft, of the EV, the extraterrestrial entity, comes out in different frequencies. Different frequencies of white turn the colors. That's their propulsion system. It's not that like you read in the papers, the ray came down and turned over a car or picked up a human. I never knew of anything like that. I hope it's right. And I hope someday we advance to that art, but I don't think so. In fact, I tell a little tale about the chapel my soldiers built at Red Canyon disappeared. I figured, did they take it and condense the atoms? You see, we're not that far advanced yet. You're talking of a lot of things that they're conjecture and possibly in the future. And I'd like to see things like that happen, but I don't think so today. I never know of any, and say at the time when I was in charge, we never worked on anything like that. The only rays we worked on were really the laser. We perfected that. So that's the best I can do for you. You're getting into the future. Maybe Spielberg would give you, he puts that in his movies.
Yeah, thank you. I just seen a show on sightings that talked about the black UFO hovercraft going over states and being in relation to why the earthquakes happen. But I didn't know if that was really accurate or inaccurate.
Well, if you talk about hovercraft, one of the most fascinating hovercraft that I know about, I just mentioned it, the Foo Fighter. It did exactly that. Electromagnetically hovered in the air, radio controlled. It chased our bombers. And it hovered. Maybe a lot of these are helicopters. Hovering, yes, we had a toy that the toy store put out. It hovered in the air, and then they took it off of the market. And the Germans had something that would hover, reverse spin of the propellers, opposite spin. That's what the Wankel engine was invented for. You know about the Wankel engine? It was in one of the cars, one of the automobiles had it. The Germans invented that for hovercraft. They wanted to use them during the war. Now, the best hovercraft we have are our helicopters. And I can tell you a story about that. I was given a mission when I was in R&D to check our helicopters. I went down to Texas to look them over for combat. I came up with a recommendation that was not good for combat. It was too fragile a platform, too vulnerable against a major opponent. And of course, I was overruled. So we used them in Vietnam. We used them in Korea, but only as ambulances to transport wounded and such. Worked very well. In Vietnam, we started to use the helicopters in combat. It's a very flimsy platform, unstable. When the pilot is always pulling to the right, it always pulls to the right, and he has to always bring it back. They put rocket pods on, they fail. I was up St. Augustine one day when I was still in the Army, and they put Gatling gun on the helicopter. I told them, what are you going to do, kill the pilot? The Gatling gun, you can't muzzle brake it. They tried it, they fired it, it caved the whole side of the helicopter in. And then when I objected to using the helicopter in combat, you can't give a pilot any protection. Naturally, I was overruled. The first year in the war in Vietnam, we lost 3,000 helicopters. That figure has never been made public. Every year after that, we lost almost 3,000. That helicopter is not built for combat. You can't withstand a major opponent with the type of guns and missiles we have today. I worked on the TOW missile. I even was the first one that brought out, of all things, I had a Swiss film. From that film, we developed spent uranium warheads. It went through 7 inches of armor, 20-millimeter warhead, made out of spent uranium. It sparkled like a sparkler on Halloween, on 4th of July. It went through. So a helicopter up against weapons of that type is like shooting sitting ducks. And it was proven in Vietnam. I think the figure reads in Vietnam that we lost something like 15 or 16,000 helicopters. Just imagine how many men were in there.
Next question. Oh, hi.
Hi. Hey, Colonel, it was so nice meeting you in Florida, and it's really a pleasure to see you again. My question is about the laser you described that cuts in between the cells. That also describes the kind of incisions made in the cattle mutilations. Do you know anything about the cattle mutilations and also the crop circle phenomenon?
Yes.
Asking about the laser that cuts through the cells, very similar to the cattle mutilations, if you could speak to that, and also the crop circles.
Yeah. Have you heard me talk before?
Excuse me?
It's my sister.
I know. That's why I asked her that.
Yeah.
Well, let me tell the people about that. The cattle, I know Linda House, who specialized in the cattle mutilations, the crop circles, and other things of that type. The cattle mutilations are something that we have to think about. They took mostly sex organs, which are nearest to the human. And the big mystery is, what did they do with them? I think we know, but we guessed. Why was there no blood? The extraterrestrial has no blood. Are they experimenting? I don't know. There's a reason for it, though, which we don't know. The laser cutter, I had one. I didn't know what I had, and for a long time I couldn't activate it. 3 laser beams came out. One cut, the other seared, and the one in the middle repelled it made any cells in the body, it repelled them. It didn't cut through cells. So that meant the wound was very fine. Now I'll tell the audience one thing that I learned not too long ago. Dr. Rowe, who was my doctor and operated on my stomach, he was telling me a story one day. He said, in the 1960s, 5 American doctors went to Russia. They took them to a hospital where they were operating, and they had an instrument that was going to remove a lung or something. So the doctors moved back, said this blood will splatter all over.
They can't hear you back there.
Yeah. And the Russian doctor said, oh no, there won't be any blood. So they used an instrument that they went through, cut this thing they were cutting out, part of the lung, and it sealed also, and no blood came out, spilled. The doctors wanted the instrument, and the commissar came up and said no. Gave him a story where they got it, which was not true. One of the countries wasn't advanced enough for anything like that. So these doctors went out to one of these shops that sold medical supplies, and they saw one of these, and they brought it to the United States. The Russians sued. The American judge turned them down, so it's being used now. And my doctor, Dr. Rose, said, in fact, Phil, I used that on you. That's how I cut and sealed your stomach. So now I told him, well, you get me one of those things so when I give a lecture, I can show it to people. We're using it now. And that was something like some of the things I had that I didn't know how they worked, really. And these doctors were surprised at such an instrument. Where did the Russians get it? We think they got it from one of their crashes, because there was crashes in Russia, too. Now, one thing that I never told anyone, the German scientist told me, and this friend of mine found out in the book when he went to Russia to talk to KGB general, I gave him a list of questions. He came back, he said he showed the general the questions. He said, I know what you want. And this is in the book, in the photographs. And this general, KGB general said, I know what you want, but what do you want? You want me killed? He said, they'll kill me if I give you this information. I had information even from the Germans that there was a similar unit like we had. One of the enemies of our unit was the shadow government. They didn't like the military, they had destroyed our organization. The German scientists that perfected some of these things didn't like the Nazis, so they didn't give it to them. Same in Russia. I had an approach from the astronaut Popovich, the woman. There was a similar unit in Russia. Didn't trust the communists and had the UFOs. One UFO flew 14 seconds over the base at Bukhanar, the Cosmodrome in Russia. All the towers fell apart. The nuclear binding on all the rivets and welds came apart. The Cosmodrome was shut down for 2 weeks. It must have been electromagnetism, and like Wilbur Smith told me, it destroyed the nuclear binding. And so that's some of the areas that things that happen. This instrument that I had, I talked to doctors about that. And I sent it to Fort Monmouth, which was our electronic labs. I think that it was a surgical instrument. And I think that's what they used. Now, we can't duplicate the cuts that were made in those mutilations. We'd have to use an apparatus that was too big and clumsy and heavy to even begin to cut the way they cut it. Those surgical cuts were beautifully made, and they were sealed, they seared. That was done by a laser cutter. It had to be.
Any idea what they were using the cow genitals for? What kind of research they might be doing?
What were they using the reproductive organs from the cows for? Any idea?
Well, this is my opinion. I discussed it with some of my friends in the military. I think that the master race is sort of a deterioration. Because remember, the Sumerians, 4000 BC, talk about their super race. Well, I do like Pavarotti. I hold a handkerchief. And I think that they're studying these. Not only they cut out sections, but they cut out eyes also, and other tissue like that. I think maybe there's been a deterioration in the sick. Now, I write about in this thing I'm just making on the extraterrestrial, that the extraterrestrial has no sex organs. His creator decided he doesn't need them in space. They don't propagate like we do. There's no, said, go out and multiply. They don't multiply by, like humans do with sex. Also, in space, it's a distraction. And my doctor agreed with that. So the EB doesn't need any sex organs for his mission. Just like he doesn't need ears and eyes and a nose. He only needs one lung. We have 2 kidneys. He only has 1. So when the creators created them, they knew DNA well enough to leave out the organs that wouldn't tax the brain or weren't needed. And my studies on what I knew, this is true. That's what they did. Now we should study that. What did they leave out? That means it can be, in cloning, it can be left out of a human. But then also, he doesn't eat, no food aboard, no water aboard, no toilet facilities aboard. He doesn't live like on Earth. Even our deep sea fish adopt their environment. So he adopts his environment, which is electromagnetism. So this is what we know about the sex organs. I think they're studying those for their purposes, not to clone, but the creators. I think they need something like that. Of course, we don't know now. And people have asked me where'd they come from. I told them, geez, I wish I knew. We had no idea. Who were they?
And the crop circles?
We didn't know. The crop circles, I discussed this with Linda Howes. She wanted to know what I thought the crop circles were. I told them what I think they are, they're messages to us. I told them if some wise, intelligent scientist someday duplicates those and puts them in an integrated circuit, which integrated circuit look like some of them, we will get a message. That is my opinion. The fakers that fake circles, they're just like our debunkers here. They're smart alecks that go out to do that. But some of those circles are real. They were put down there by UFO. Are they sending us a message? I think they are. What is the message? When I talked about the organized radio signals coming from space, they were real. NSA picked them up, but we never were able to decode the message. SETI was trying to get space messages. They never got any. In fact, I think some of these messages and organized messages are the creators or their masters communicating with globe number 1 of the extraterrestrial. We pick them up, but we can't decode them. And NASA's in the decoding business. NSA, I mean. So that's my answer to what they're doing with the crop circles and the mutilations. They're real, this happens. They're doing it. And they're taking them back. Where? I don't know. Maybe they have a mothership someplace. Maybe they have a base on the moon or Mars. I think they do.
Next question. Colonel, I'd like to know about the debris from the wreckage. It wouldn't make sense to me that they would just study it for a couple of years and then kind of just box it away. Are they still studying it today, and where is it? Where is the debris from the spaceship that went down, the metal, everything that they picked up? Where is it stored, and are they doing studies today? I understand that you retired over about 35 years ago, but I'd still like to know if you know what's going on with the technology and the R&D on it today.
Let me tell you something that happened, partial answer on that. I was at Kirkland Air Force Base, book signing on my book. And then we went to the post exchange on the base. And I was sitting at this table, it was low like this. So a colonel walks up to me in uniform, and he kneels down in front of me, and he says, "Everything that you wrote is true." And then he got up and left. And this was on the base at Kirkland. You know, the B-2s and things are based out there and so on. Then the lieutenant colonel came up, and he said the same thing, and he left. Then the captain came up, and he said, "I'm a pilot of a B-2. What you say in the book is true." Then I got a lieutenant came up. 4 officers, within a half hour, came up at Kirkland Air Force to tell me that what was in the book was true. And then a young fellow came up to the table. He was looking at the book. And I asked him, "Who are you, son? You in the Air Force?" He said, "Yes, sir, I'm an airman, private." I told him, "You going to buy the book?" He said, "Well, I'd like to." I told him, "Look, son, I remember when I was a corporal and a private, I didn't have $2 in my pocket sometime to buy anything. The book's yours, take it." Oh, the boy was happy. And he walked out with a book. So, I say 5 people like that came. And then when I was signing the bookstore in Albuquerque, I had a strange thing happen. There was when I got there was about 200 people. In fact, I signed books till 11:30 at night in the bookstore. And while I was signing the book, an old woman come up, nicely dressed, and real neat, nice looking woman, but she must have been in her 70s at least. She came up and she walked up to the table. She didn't get in the line. And she leaned over and said, "Colonel, I got up on my sick bed. I had to come here and shake hands with you." So I reached up and hugged her. And all the audience clapped. And then I wrote to Simon Schuster and told me, "Get the name of that woman. I want to know who she is so I can write to her." Well, they never did. I lost track of her. But that poor woman, she said she was so interested that she got out of her sick bed to come up there. And then I had some people with young children, about 8 or 9 years old, waiting there. And I figured, why are they waiting here all this time? When the line ended, they were waiting so that the young boys could come up and talk to me. And they waited about 3 hours for that. So this was some of the interest on the book signings. But the biggest thing there was these 4 officers that came up to me and made it a point to come up to me. Now, if it's being hidden or not talked about, they endangered themselves. They could cause them trouble. But they had to tell me this. And I think I know what's in the B-2. Also, it cost $1 billion to build one. That's why it's so expensive. It couldn't fly on its configuration. So somewhere, like Obert said, we've been helped. Some is still going on. But a lot of research, you'd think it would be gone. One day I was talking to the general and something came up. He said, Phil, somebody has surely thought of this. Maybe so, General, but every time I search, and we say this, I search around, I find out nobody's thought of it. And it happened on just what he said. So we surmise that somebody must be working on this. My experience is when you look around, in many cases, that there's nobody working on it. We should be, though. That's why I say this new science. We should create a new science, start from scratch. Not take an airplane and turn it into a spacecraft. You can't do that. It won't work.
Next question.
It's me, Colonel. How are you holding up?
Pretty good. As long as the audience holds up.
What?
I will.
Can I put this down?
Yeah. I won't leave these people as long as they want to ask me questions.
Well, I think they're running out of gas because they've had a big day and they're going to have a big day tomorrow. I would like to start out by publicly.
I'll be back because today I looked out there.
So will I.
And your people tried to get me to go through those tunnels out there. They even made me climb a ladder, thinking I'd go over the wall there.
Well, the next time you go, you won't be able to climb on top. You have to get in with blindfolds.
I saw all of you in the field out there, and I told the young men I was with, I told them, this reminds me of my soldiers. Only thing, I told them, these people are doing it voluntarily, and a lot of those soldiers, I had to force them to do it. I saw you all going through there. And this thing about, finding the blindfold and finding, that's true. I've had many experiences with, what the mind can do. In fact, I'll tell you a little story how powerful the mind can be. I wrote speeches for Dr. Mayo, Charles Mayo. He was delegate at the United Nations on confessions and bacteriological warfare, and I wrote a speech on the atrocities. So Dr. Mayo gave the speech, and he called me. He said, "What'd you do to me? You handed me this speech." Now, I've had 3,000 requests for 3,000 speaking engagements in every newspaper. You get up here and tell me what I said. So I had to go up there, and then they called him to appear in front of a panel, which was going to work to maybe punish these boys for confessing. So Dr. Mayo said, "Why call me? Call the man down there who wrote the speech and did the research." So they called me. I went over to the Pentagon, and there's an elite delegation there. Admirals, generals, human resources professors, PhDs. So I get up on the podium, and the Air Force had given me 90 prisoners, and I was responsible in Korea for this. So, and I'll show you how the mind works. So I got up to that audience and I said, I wouldn't take the prosecution job for any amount of money, but I'd take the defense free of charge, because I would try to indict every one of you in this room. You're responsible. You should have known better what the communists would do to these kids, and you didn't teach them. Now, who are you going to punish? You or them?
Colonel?
Yeah.
Colonel, Daisy, you want to ask your question? You're leaving your hostess standing.
Yeah, but I'm going to answer our question on mind control.
Oh, mind control.
Yeah.
Is that what we're getting to here?
Yes, that's what I'm getting to. So during the course of compiling all this, when I talk to these people, officers, chaplains, and soldiers and all, that were prisoners, told me that and they were mistreated and all, that when a soldier could will himself to death, when he'd give up, they said if they couldn't get to him, he would lean against the wall, fall, and they could almost named the second he was going to die. He'd will himself to death. And this happened over and over. If they could get to him, they'd try to bring him out of it. They killed themselves with their mind. Now, this actually happened in the prison camps in North Korea. And reliable men, the soldiers themselves who were present, told me this. So I'm telling you this to see what the mind can do. And say, that's extreme. And I was telling her that. So that's the question, the way you have to discipline your minds and what you can do. Because you can do a lot with your mind.
Yeah, I know. I'd like to begin by saying thank you very much for coming. And I already tonight at dinner told you that there are how many billions of people in the world, and that every one of those people have divinity in them, and every one of them have an opportunity to do something great in their life. Unfortunately, very, very few of them ever hear the drum and get up and go beyond their little box and do something wonderful to try to help the world. And I think that your work in writing this book and being so forthcoming, you are one of those individuals that has been preserved, has had an enormous amount of experience, and for the reason that you could share it to the world to help relieve people of this stupid guilt that they feel when their government tells them they don't know what they're talking about and they're not really seeing what they're seeing is a sort of a nasty intimidation that people get when they do experience extraordinary. And I feel that you have been given a wonderful life and been exposed to many things so that you could help come out and be one of the many that would say to people, yes, these things really do exist, even though your government since 1947 has been lying to you, and they have. I don't care how you color it, they have. And finally allowing people the freedom to think beyond the boundaries of their own need to survive and their own self-interest. So I want to thank you for your life and for the book that you wrote and for the books that are going to be forthcoming, and your ability to come to people like us and to see, you're not teaching us anything new, Colonel. What you're doing is you're verifying levels of our own experience. So with that, I'm very happy that you came and certainly do want you back. Now, I have a couple of things I want to say to you. It's so interesting about the conversation we're going to begin with tonight about cattle mutilations that was brought up tonight at the dinner table and was also brought up again tonight here. And I found it intriguing, your reply, that that perhaps those creators were taking the sex organs of cattle and of horses, and they were taking part of their lip, their ear, their eye, and I found your answer to be very broad-minded, that maybe they were actually creating from those animals their bodies to be able to live here, a new being. So I just have a cute little thing I want to say about that. If these are the same people that created the EBEs for space travel, certainly have the ability to manipulate the DNA, I don't think that they would really have to mutilate cattle and horses to get their sex organs to create a new being, since they already are creating beings in their own image anyway. And so I feel that maybe there's another side to this. maybe our consciousness, at least here in the West, is so sexually oriented on one level that maybe they think that in order to come here and to live amongst us, that they've got to have the attitude that a lot of people have, and that is, well, Jesus, if you're going to be Superman, I guess you could borrow a little from a bull, and if you were going to hung like a horse, and maybe they got us all wrong. Maybe they don't really have to look like that or be like that, and maybe that's part of our own fault of the kind of information and messages that we're sending out. If they have to create a being that is made from animal parts in order to exist here, that may be a very sad commentary on who we are consciously as conscious beings. Now, the other thing I want to say to you is that I myself have experienced UFOs since I can remember, and I've written about them. And I've had tremendous experiences with them all through my life. Since Ramtha has been in my life, I've had several more experiences, and there have been people that have witnessed those craft coming overhead when he said they would come overhead, and some of them are in this audience tonight. And I find that my frustration with the government, I don't think, and it's difficult for me to accept that our government is so disorganized and it was all about funding, that they would perpetrate a very well-organized cover-up that's lasted all of these years. And that even up to modern day, when people are having sightings, for example, the UFO flap that happened in Mexico, at the solar eclipse. It was recorded by thousands of people, and yet no one in this government wanted to comment on what that was that all those people were seeing, because you see, forever, including myself, this was always swamp gas, or it was a ball lightning, or it was a weather balloon. And I am ashamed of this government in many ways. I'm ashamed because there are people like myself and many people in this audience who have had the experience of extraordinary life beings that this government has intimidated, harassed, and made their lives miserable, and in many cases, those people have disappeared. So I sort of take issue with this, and I take issue because I have been one of those people, and no one is ever going to tell me that my experiences were in my mind and that I didn't really see those, because I did see them, as well as many people here. And I suppose what this comes down to is, and what I was saying to you earlier, is that I feel that the government has disenfranchised its citizenry. And I feel like that it has, because I know that they know more. I have a difficult time accepting that this was all about budgets. Being disenfranchised by our own government, who has another agenda, and not allowing the people to know the truth. To know the truth. It can't be that hard. I feel that the experiences that you had were so wonderful and so rich and so much insight. But I also feel that from the time that you went out of the loop, I think that there is a lot that's gone on. And if UFOs, if one faction of them come through corridors, dimensional corridors, low gravity areas, that those that came in were not just exclusive in your lifetime or at those particular times you were working on it. I think that they do it all of the time, and they're appearing everywhere. And I suppose where I'm going with this is that it would be, and maybe this will happen because of your work, that since you were there and you knew all of the answers, I dare say there have been a lot more incidences since you knew. And I would hope that by virtue of who you are, that it will start opening the floodgate so that the government, by the people and for the people, that this government will finally come out and say, look, we're sorry that we've made you feel so stupid. And we're sorry that we've kept you in a 12-year-old mentality, and we're sorry we harassed you. But in fact, what you've seen is really the truth. And yes, we know there's bases on the moon, and we know that they're flying around in our atmosphere, and hey, we were afraid to tell you because we really don't know what to do about it. I mean, at least that would be impeccable, and it would have integrity to it. And I disagree with you, Colonel, and I disagree because you're right. I never was in the loop, per se, and I didn't have access to documents like you do, and I can't espouse all of the people of importance that you've espoused, but I do have a heavy on my side, and I can tell you that I disagree. I know that there are bases. There are bases in the ocean. There are bases in this country. I know, and I know that our government knows that. And I know that the Europeans know that. And I know that the Russians know that. It doesn't matter what nationality. I know that they're here. And what we don't know is this a pact to improve our world? Like you said, the EB said to you, turn off your radar, and you said, why? What's in it for me? And a new world? Well, I think that maybe what is about to happen is that that's exactly what's going to go on. And I think it would be difficult to bring about a new world without a new consciousness. So I know, and I know that from a place that it would be very hard to tell you, but I know that those bases are here. I also know that there have been many people abducted by whoever's doing the abductions, that they also have implants in them. Because my teacher told me that a long time ago, and I'll believe him above anybody else. Now, I hope and desire that while you're out there and you're making this a little bit better to swallow for people, that a lot more of that information will come to you, and perhaps through you, that you can add that knowledge to groups like us, that there is now a current base of technology that we now have. And I now know that we are working on this, and now I know that we do have bases, and now I know that there are aliens walking amongst us. I've been accused of being one myself, you could say. And I think that, and I hope and desire that that manifests for you, because to sit up there and to say, I don't believe it, I never saw it, I didn't know it, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And I also want to share with the audience, and thanks to you, on those 2 chapters you sent me that you had written many years ago that I got to read, because they confirmed some things that Ramtha said. And I don't know how many people were here when he did the teaching in this arena called Raiders from Above. I don't know. You guys raise your hands. How many of you remember that cloud that stayed over the arena all day long? It didn't go anywhere, and it was the only place there was a cloud. Well, in that talk, he was describing to us these aliens, and he was describing their craft. And one of the things that he said was marvelous, was that some of these have, their craft is actually an extension of their body. It is a part of their body. And that they guide these crafts with their minds. I don't know how many of you remember that. They guide it with their mind. There is no steering wheel, there is no joystick. It's all done through the mind. That it's actually one living organism, they're alive. Now, I'd never heard that and read that since until you verified that in that document. Now, second thing that you verified is that Ramtha's always taught us that we are surrounded by an electromagnetic field, and that really the whole Earth is surrounded by an electromagnetic field. So we could then deduce from that that the smallest organisms here also have their electromagnetic field. So in a way, it is important for us as human beings to have that field, because we too would not be able to function without it, because it is integral to the mind that we have. And he taught us that there is a state of mind called analogical mind. And what happens when we reach analogical mind, the bubble of the field that is around us, starts to turn in opposite directions. And as it turns in opposite directions, there is a point of no time, no space, in which we, the human being, are then caught up. Our field changes. He also taught us that the masters who have lived here, who were able to levitate, and that's not just rumor or myth, I mean, it's documented. They have been witnessed, especially in Buddhist temples, that the way that they create the sense of levitation is an anti-gravity field, and what they've actually done is that they have turned the wheel within a wheel around their own body and created an anti-gravity field, and they're actually floating inside of that. Now, this is common knowledge to this school, and it's one of the things that we work upon, and the only way that we're going to have to be able to move from this point to the other side of the moon is when we develop that faculty. And the moment we do, then we will appear on the other side of the moon, just like Van Neumann did, working on the Philadelphia experiment, working with the magnets or the field monitors that allowed that ship to disappear here and then reappear over here. You verified that the UFO that you had knowledge of, not only was it an extension of the EVs who used it from their mind, but also that the UFO itself had around it the same fields that we work on here in the school, and that it is a wheel within a wheel with a center core that is timeless and spaceless. So you verified something that no one else has ever verified, and for that I am eternally grateful, because it only goes to prove another point for Ramtha. He knows what he's talking about. And furthermore, even if our government, in which I believe Bob Lazar, when he talks about the UFOs that he encountered at Area 51, the Groom Lake area, I believe him, because I've looked at him and I've watched him speak, and I know he's telling the truth. I agree that we have the craft, but I don't agree, and I agree with you, that there's no one here, not even in the US military or the industrial military complex or the secret government, that could even fly the craft that these EVs flew. And why? Because if they have an extra lobe in their brain, that brain was created only as the guidance system and the manipulation system of that craft. Anyone that I know outside of the school that would get into one of those EV crafts and put that headband on and they say, now fly this ship, if they can make it taking off from this end of the field to the other end of the field, maybe they can do it. Because it's going to mean that those people are human beings that got to have an extraordinary focus. That their mind is on the business at hand. And I don't think that there's anybody in this country that has a brain that's that good that could fly those craft anyway. Hopefully, one day, when we get used to going back and forth on this field, and we can guide our own body, then maybe we can guide one of those UFOs. I have wanted to say this and express my feelings because I have had these interactions. And my heart has always gone out to the people in wherever across this country, families that see these extraordinary machines, and then to have their government rebuke them and make fun of them and send disinformation out about them. So I just had to voice that tonight, and in a way, in a great way, you're going to help open the mind and get people to say, wow, I'm not crazy. I did see what I saw, and hopefully one day soon the government will be forthcoming, and to thank you for verifying some things that needed to be verified. That's all.
All right, thank you very much. Thanks for being such a great audience tonight. And thank you, Colonel. I think they want you back.
Colonel Philip Corso died on July 16, 1998, in Jupiter, Florida, from a heart attack. His book, A Day After Roswell, appeared on the New York Times bestsellers list for several weeks after it was published, and received both favorable and unfavorable reviews. I leave you now with some more detailed analysis of the Colombian Boogosphere.
95 varía, 95, 97 es normal, pero sí, regularmente un estándar es de 95-96% de aluminio, es correcto. Y después de checar el aluminio, nos vino la pregunta, después de ver de dónde provenía la esfera, nos vino la pregunta para analizar, a ver, vamos a ver a qué tipo de aluminio es, porque en la industria de aluminio hay muchos tipos de aluminio. Entonces checamos la dureza. Al checar la dureza, al principio nos empezó a arrojar niveles de 280, 270, y llegó ocasiones en la medición que llegó hasta 332, 333. Entonces cuando analizamos, vemos, ok, vamos a ver qué tipo de aluminio es. O sea, el aluminio aeroespacial, que es el duraluminio, creo que le llaman por ahí, pues el máximo está teniendo 170, 140, 170, y esto duplicaba, o sea, el nivel de dureza. Después de esa prueba, con el ingeniero David, pusimos la prueba por la cuestión de que vimos que tenía 1.8 de hierro, checamos el magnetismo. Después de checar el magnetismo, de verificar el magnetismo con los equipos que traemos, analizamos que esté un movimiento, lógico, porque trae algo de fierro, y es normal, es natural. Entonces después volvemos a checar la dureza y a checar la temperatura, y nos percatamos que la dureza empezó a bajar considerablemente. Empezamos a tener mediciones de 120, de repente de 70, y la más mínima que llegamos a tener en la lectura fue de 33.
¿Cómo se explica eso?
No hay explicación. No hay explicación, porque para que tú tengas un nivel de dureza y para que tú puedas modificar la dureza de un metal, debe llevar temperaturas o tratamientos térmicos. Eso es lo más básico en cualquier metal. Pero no puedes tener un nivel de dureza que se incremente y descienda tanto sin ningún tratamiento térmico. Y cuando me refiero a tratamientos térmicos, son tratamientos a altas temperaturas. O sea, no a temperaturas medio ambiente. Puede haber una correlación a temperaturas del medio ambiente, pero es mínima, o sea, es mínima. No sobre 200 puntos de diferencia, que eso es algo extraordinario. Y también cuando empezamos a validar la temperatura nos manda un rango de hasta 9 dígitos de diferencia. Se está monitoreando la temperatura ambiente, que estamos en 24 grados promedio, y la esfera llegó a tener una medición de 33 grados.
¿Qué debemos hacer entonces?
Seguir investigando. seguir, yo creo que aquí lo importante es, como decía el ingeniero David, es seguir el patrón, seguir validando todos los días, seguir checando temperaturas, ver ver a niveles de alturas, niveles de altura del mar, no sé, campos energéticos, ver cómo se va comportando en diferentes lugares. Eso sería muy importante. También, no mencionó el ingeniero David, pero se checó la radiofrecuencia. Y en la radiofrecuencia, en la mañana, se emitía una frecuencia. Después salimos a un descanso, un break. Cuando regresamos, dejó de emitir esa frecuencia. Es otro dato importante. Y está validado ante las cámaras.
O sea, hace cosas que luego deja de hacer.
Es correcto.
Al revés.
Es correcto. Emite frecuencias y de repente las deja de hacer. Tiene dureza, lo deja de tener. Temperaturas altas, deja de tenerlas. O sea, es muy variante. Para mi gusto tiene, no se puede decir que vida, pero tiene una autonomía. Algo hace autónoma que se esté modificando esta esfera.